COVID-19 originated in animals sold in a so-called wet market in China.
Small steps for man, giant leaps for mankind.
Oh man, we've covered a lot of those topics. This is episode 14 of Conspiracy Conversations. You guys are blowing me away. It's been a lot of fun. We kind of went on a limb doing this. I had friends telling me like, "What are you doing? You're covering this. You're gonna do a show on that." And I think breaking away from the typical Flyover conservative nightly show where we're kind of examining culture and current events through the lens of conservative Christian values, culture and current events and what's going on in a crazy world in the microcosm, and kind of stepping back a little bit and saying, hey, what's other things we're kind of interested in that are sort of kept from us? Maybe what's happening over here. We know there's a lot of things when it comes to media, when it comes to government, and media's extension of the government in a lot of ways. It's hey, this is happening, but they want you looking over here so that you don't see this, or you don't know that this ever happened. It's hidden from you. We've covered the JFK assassination. We've covered weather patterns and ancient civilizations, and then Nephilims. We covered giant people. We've covered a lot of different things. And, this one's going to be a little more in the timeline in the current space we're in. We're pulling on one of my favorite guests we've had on the show from early on when we first began. This guy kind of stuck his neck out and came on with us and expanded our mind dramatically. I use this example every time. You can go through life thinking Rubik's Cubes are yellow, because that's what someone's told you every day of your life. But then somebody will come along who's done a few thousand hours of research in private, and they've done some hard work, and they come along and they just rotate that a little bit, and they say, but have you thought about this? And they show you some facts you didn't know and some evidence, and you're like, oh my gosh, Rubik's Cubes are red and yellow. I had no idea. And it's not that your first information is wrong a lot of the time. It's just that it's limited based on what you've been told. And today's guest is going to expand that dramatically. I got the inspiration for today's show from a quote that came from a Tucker Carlson documentary. I'm going to read this quote real quick. It says, "Is there a group of unelected bureaucratic elites that are involved in a global campaign to minimize meat consumption, convince people to not eat meat and to eat bugs instead in order to save the world from climate change?" For a guy that grew up in the Midwest on a farm, lives in Missouri, those are pretty much fighting words. And I wanted the world's best expert on this subject. He's author of the book called The Carnivore Diet. He's a beast of a character. You would have to he's almost like a guy from a movie that's just been manufactured, but he is this character every day because it's exactly who he is to his core. Dr. Shawn Baker.
David, thanks for that. Thanks for having me on again, by the way. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with your audience. So thanks. And I do share the similar concerns about the future of our nutrition and the impact it'll have on us. And in my view, there are people that certainly would like to see and prefer to see us eating a bunch of processed soybean bug gruel type of stuff. And I think there is some push for that for sure.
I don't think people realize truly that how serious that is. And you sort of look around and you think, if you had told me 5 years ago there'd be a media campaign to create fear and there would be medical experts come on that would be standing next to the president and tell you wearing masks don't help at all. They go on 60 minutes, a viral thing, wearing a mask is irrelevant. And then a few weeks later come out saying masks are the most important thing. You should wear maybe 2 if possible. When people like that are in charge and they're making policies that affect us, I think we're in a stage where people have to take personal responsibility. Like, I'm being told this, but I better own what I believe and what I know. I better do my own research. And I think that's kind of where we're at as a country. People are looking to people like yourself more than ever because the things you were saying 10 years ago and 5 years ago and 5 minutes ago are consistent and true based on a predetermined both moral compass and actual real data research.
I think it's when we look at some of the science, we have to realize that much of the science is bought and paid for. I mean, that's just the reality of it. Much of the science is produced in order to sort of support a particular narrative that particular groups want to do. And so, I mean, you see the memes about, it's just as easy to bribe a politician or a scientist as it is a politician.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's some of that. I mean, not that all scientists are bad and corrupt, but they're there for sure. And it has an influence on policy, and maybe it's done to support a policy that somebody would prefer. And I think we have to, at this point, you have to trust but verify. I mean, you might not even have to trust. You need to verify everything, because some of the things we talk about, whether it's climate change or the particulars around COVID, they're challenging for an individual to verify personally. One thing that I like about the space I'm in is nutrition and health. It's pretty easy to verify, when you feel like garbage and when you feel good. And it's pretty easy to know when you lose weight, when you don't lose weight, or when you're not depressed and when you are depressed. So we have some good ways to verify at least some of the stuff I'm talking about. Some of the other things, it's harder. You have to rely on, for instance, I know you touched on the climate. I'm not an expert on that. I don't know. I can walk outside, it's sunny today, it's cold yesterday.
Yeah.
What does that mean to me? I have no clue. I have no way of physically measuring it, but I can measure, things about my own body. And that's a nice thing. So we can pretty definitively shut down some of the BS just by saying, wait a minute, and we have to realize even experts that are well-intentioned, they're wrong all the time. I mean, and good ones will tell you that, hey, I'm pretty good at this stuff, but I make a lot of mistakes. And then you got to say, well, how do we know they're not making a mistake? And so if your personal observations, your personal experiences fly directly in face with what you're being told by some particular group of experts or some agency, then I think you've got to kind of go with what you can see, what's tangible to you. You look at I think it wasn't Orwell's book, when we're talking about 84, where they said their final command was to ignore what they see in front of you or something.
Yeah. Stop
believing your eyes. I can't remember if it was his or somebody else's book, but you're literally out there seeing stuff, and people telling you they're gaslighting you. Say it's not true. You're being falsely misled. Yeah, who is this? This is
George Orwell.
That's the Orwell quote I was talking about. And we're seeing a little of that. We're seeing this constant gaslighting in the media, and it's almost like a sport at this point. It's almost comical but tragic at the same time.
And I think that's the point we're in, is where people, if we go back to the 50s, and you just saw what was on television, and the rules that you were given, and you just did as you were told, there's really not, you could have a pretty good life. You probably have a decent marriage, raise your kids, they go to school, they're going to probably not come home crazy. Today, if you just do what you're told, if you just believe everything that's on TV, it actually could be detrimental to your finances as the dollar's devalued. It's detrimental to your health. It's, when you're looking at people that are in charge, and the benefit with climate change, and this, it's not going to be that focused the whole episode. We're going to get to meat deep and hard here in a second. But the thing that baffles me is you got people using climate change for the very reason that you said. It's hard to verify. It's beyond arm's reach. You can't quantify it. I might take health advice from you based on, your body and the fruit you produce. But when you got people that can implement large scale policy change based on something, like rising sea levels, while at the same time Barack Obama and John Kerry have new multi-million-dollar mansions built on oceanfront property. And so there's a little bit of where you kind of can't come back. If rising sea levels are a big issue and they think this is going to happen over the next 10 years, why would they be building homes on the water? And I just don't think the people in charge in a lot of areas of life that have been given large levers of power are to be taken seriously based on their track records and based on their own behaviors in private jets and worried about carbon release of cows when, they're doing more than any thousands of us will do, in a lifetime. And so I think people got to kind of wake up and be like, are you being programmed by the screens, or do you have the ability still as an intelligent adult to take in information and decide for yourself what's true and what's not true to the best of your ability?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they would be building homes where you're at in Missouri, in the middle of the country. There's no danger from flooding from the sea there. I mean,
no, it's lots of hills.
I don't know how many of them have mansions in Missouri, but maybe a few.
There's not very many. If you have money out here, it's put into other resources, for sure. The way you can tell, age of people out in Missouri, and I kind of joke about this. I'm in my 50s. I got grandkids. I have 2 large freezers and one that came with my refrigerator, and I have 3 grills. So that's how you can tell. If you're in your 20s, you might have just the freezer that comes in your refrigerator and maybe a small gas grill. The older you get, the more freezers and grills you have. I can almost do it as a test. If you're at church or somebody, don't even ask their age. You can say, how many freezers and grills you got? And you can kind of tell how old they are. It's a sign of maturity. It's a rite of passage into manhood.
Yeah, I've got, what do I got? I think I have 4 freezers and 3 grills. So there you go. Must be old.
Well, it shows your age.
What's important to you at some point, right? Yeah.
Right there for sure. And I kind of want to tie this in. We don't have to address it right now, but as a backdrop, it feels like there's been a weakening of men. There's a lot of male confusion that takes place. And some of that, maybe we can just trace back towards hormone changes in food, or maybe they're just hungry, and malnourished. I don't know, but it seems like the majority of people in charge in the political process, and I'm talking about Republicans and Democrats, but seem to be weak men and angry women, seem to be in charge in a lot of case scenarios. What you represent is you don't seem to look to your left and your right for a lot of approval when you're doing things. People can follow your Instagram. I think be careful though when you go to his Instagram, because it's a little bit of a time machine. It's like an hour from now, because you're going to watch videos of him like eating 3 steaks in 3 minutes, and like his workout might be just to pick up a heavy rock and just carry it for a half mile, like these maybe like cavemen kind of workouts. Like, hey, here's something heavy, I can pick it up, and how far can I carry it? But you're doing things that sort of are so against the grain, counterculture to what that media narrative, and I say weak men and angry women, what they're pushing life is supposed to look like. You stand in stark contrast to that in almost every phase of your daily routine. You're strong. You take care of your body. You're an MD, and you're healthy, which it's odd.
Yeah, it would seem it wouldn't be that way, but quite honestly, when you go into healthcare, most of the people who work in healthcare, and the MDs, the nursing assistants, all the people, there's a lot of poor health in that group, and it's hard to be inspired to be to take care of your own health when your doctor's sitting across from you and he or she's 50 pounds overweight, trying to tell you how to be healthy. And it's like we became very disconnected. Medicine in general has long since gone from teaching and healing. A doctor's supposed to be a teacher and then ultimately a healer. And now we've become, just basically, subcontractors for the pharmaceutical industry. I think that's
look at that sick freak on the screen right there. If this one, you guys got to come back. If you're listening to this while you're mowing the grass or something, you got to come back and watch the clips that were playing. 2 things that jump out at me. One is there's a lot of kind of viral shots lately that have gone around of RFK Jr. working out. And he's running for presidential candidate on the Democratic side, and he's beaten up for being this like anti-vax person. And then they got Bill Gates next to him, so people are putting these memes up all the place of like Bill Gates on half the screen, like, hey, trust the science, and you got his body, and then you got RFK. Have you seen the pictures of him like working out just in jeans on, like, I don't know if he's in Venice Beach or something like that, but the guy's built like a brick house. And taking care of his body. You were a guest on Joe Rogan. It's one of his more popular episodes when he had you on Joe Rogan. Yeah, there he is. There's RFK on the right. I mean, it's like, I don't know. He doesn't seem very anti-science, or if he is, then maybe we should all be anti-science. I think he's actually more real science, maybe in some ways than not. But Dr. Hotez was on Joe Rogan recently, and he was a big proponent, for medical advice over the last few years. Did you see the cut of Joe Rogan asking him about his health regimen? He's like, I'm a junk food junkie. No, I don't take supplements. I took some vitamin D for a little bit because some intern suggested it, but that was it. And I mean, it was the kindest, because Joe did it with a smile and kind of a sweetness, but it was the kindest beatdown I've ever seen of a grown man in public.
Yeah, I mean, it's, if we want to go back to the whole COVID debacle is what I'll call that, because I think it really was. I think we really screwed up the whole way it was treated. But, the fact that we largely ignored health during this pandemic, we didn't even address, hey, this would be a good time to maybe stop eating garbage. It might be a good time to lose that spare tire. It might be a good time to start getting some activity. Instead, it was lock everybody up, tell everybody to hide under their beds and watch the TV. And I think it ultimately harmed a lot of people, not just whether or not they got COVID or not, but I mean, a lot of people, and not everybody gained weight, but those that did, I mean, they gained significant weight. Some of them gained 30 pounds on it. I think I saw a stat like 45% of Americans gained weight, and of those that did, the average was 29 pounds. The reality is that many of those people will never, ever, ever lose that weight again. They have gone on, they've been propelled down this negative, vicious cycle to where they will just continue to get sicker and sicker and sicker. And a large percentage of those people are forever captured. And, it's good for business. I mean, quite honestly, I mean, it's like, hey, we can sell more proton pump inhibitors and antidepressants. And, if you get an autoimmune disease, some ridiculously expensive immune modulating biologic drug. So, it's a shame. I'm embarrassed with the amount of resource we have in this country and the amount of intelligence that we supposedly have. We can't, we should be, RFK should not be an anomaly. He should be the average dude. I mean, he's approaching 70. Good for him. I think he looks in great shape. That we have the capacity for that to be the majority of the people. But instead, if you look outside, the majority of the people are, what are we at now? Over 70+% of us are either overweight or obese. 25% of us are on some sort of mental health drug, and that numbers are going. 50% of us are diabetic or pre-diabetic. I mean, these stats are, you'd fire the president. If you had a company and those are your stats, you'd fire the CEO a long time ago. And yet we have a country where we are clearly failing from that metric, that condition. Everybody's mentally ill, everybody's sick, everybody's fat, everybody's overweight, everybody's tired, does not lead to healthy societal discourse. I mean, you got everybody that's mad at each other, everybody's screaming. No one can think straight. They don't even know who they are. It is really a crazy time. And I think, whether your political beliefs are left or right or in the middle or libertarian, I think the message, that RFK came out with is like, hey, we need to address this problem. We need to address the problem of this horrible, abysmal condition we find ourselves in society from a health and mental health standpoint. That's got to be a very high priority. It should be one of the top priorities for any incoming president or whoever has the impact on this stuff. Instead, we have, obese people as assistant secretary of health. I mean, you see this Rachel Levine character. Yeah. That's not healthy. I mean, I'm not inspired to do anything with that. I mean, you look around the world and you see Maggie de Block, the former minister in Belgium, morbidly. I mean, she looks like Jabba the Hutt. I mean, literally. I mean, I'm saying that not to be mean, but I mean, literally, she looks like she's a melted wax candle person. Those things are just ridiculous. And I mean, we need some people that at least understand what it means to be able to understand health for themselves. I mean, if you can't conquer what you're putting in your mouth, you don't have the discipline to do that. I mean, how can you be an effective leader of any type? I mean, it's just. But
especially of that category, we have some of the most unhealthy people in charge of creating health policies. And you may know this stat better than I've heard it. I should be able to quote it. It's the percentage of prescriptions, like percentage of the U.S. population in percentage relationship to the world, and then the amount of prescriptions used in the world that are consumed by the U.S. It's like we're like 3% of the world or 5% of the world or something like that. And we consume like 80% of the pharmaceutical drugs of the planet.
Yeah, I think that those numbers sound about right.
If the numbers aren't right, the ratio, the idea is correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think those numbers are fairly close to accurate. I mean, we planet, what are we, 340 million, and the world population is just shy of 8 billion. And so whatever that percentage is, and I believe we do consume something like 80% of the world's drugs are consumed by.
Is there something wrong with the water here? Is there something wrong with the air in America that or if you took blood work, you'd say, oh my gosh, you're obviously you're deficient in this drug or that drug. Is it a deficiency in our blood? What's wrong with America that we're in such worse shape than the rest of the world?
Well, I mean, we're one of the two countries in the world that allow us to advertise pharmaceuticals on TV. It's U.S. and New Zealand are the two countries that allow that. The federal lobbying dollars, pharmaceutical industry is by far more than double anybody else. So I mean, it's clear conflict of interest, and our politicians, by and large, I think for every member of Congress there are 3 lobbyists from the pharmaceutical industry. So you can imagine how much pressure to just make this pro pharmacy agenda. I mean, that's what's out there, and it's killing people. I mean, literally is making us, a very sad, weak, addicted population. Terrible.
And I this isn't the topic of the show, but you got to kind of create this as a background, because you have to be at least a student of history in the microcosm. I'm not talking people need to be an expert on like Roman culture, but if you're not aware of what happened 2 years ago and 3 years ago and 4 years ago and 5 years ago, when these new policies, which we're going to be talking about as it comes along, if people want to control our diet, control the way that we farm, control what we eat, control these kind of basic things, and make massive shifts in the dietary structure of people, we got to look at. Now, these are the same people that brought us the food pyramid. These are the same people that said masks don't help. Same people said you need 2 masks. Same people that brought lockdowns. It's this unelected bureaucratic state that seems to have a stranglehold on the most powerful positions in the world. I want to play a clip real quick from the World Economic Forum. They just had one of their, environmentally focused meetings that they do, annually. They all fly in private jets to get there and talk about how we need to reduce everybody's, carbon footprint because it's such a big concern to them. And then they ski for a few days and kind of feel like they're the legitimate activists. This one was less crazy than some of the past. I don't even know if Bill Gates was at this one, but they've gone to great lengths to purchase bug companies, and this has been going on for a number of years now. Here's one of the speakers. I'll play this short clip from the World Economic Forum meeting they just recently had. One of the corporate speakers that they put on a platform.
It's a very important point that you are addressing. My daughter, 24, inspired me and said, "Dad, how can you advocate for these zero carbon value chains if you still eat meat?" And so I stopped eating meat. Now the math would say, well, you need to stop eating meat 11 years to compensate for a flight to Thailand. Yes, but if 1 billion people stop eating meat, I tell you it has a big impact. Not only does it have a big impact on the current food system, but it will also inspire innovation of food systems. And I predict that we will have proteins not coming from meat in the future. They will probably taste even better. So why are we trying to mimic meat if we can have a better taste? They will be zero carbon and much healthier than the kind of food that we eat today.
I guess, first of all, are you aware of research of a pocket of people in society that have lived for 20, 30, 40, 50, or 100 years without meat, living on bugs, and what were their results like?
Well, there's no societies that have ever lived, completely free of meat or animal products, I should say. There's obviously, most people will point to the continent of India and talk about, or the subcontinent of India rather, talk about the fact that there's been, hundreds of millions of vegetarians there. And when we look at, when we survey the population of India, we see that 90% of them, even among the wealthy, are not hitting the RDA for protein. We see incredibly high rates of things like iron deficiency and anemia. So there are all kinds of consequences to, and that's still including dairy and eggs. And going completely meat-free has significant impacts on things like cognitive and developmental milestones for kids. I mean, we clearly see that. There's pretty significant literature that supports that. I know, we've got this position paper from the American Dietetics and Nutritionists organization came out in 2016 saying, well, a vegan diet is okay for all ages and stages, and yet all 3 of the authors were ethical vegans on that study. Most of the reviewers, or at least half the reviewers, were also vegans. Probably cancer at a young age, like 50. And so that particular, obviously there's some ethical conflict of interest that's there. I think that this push to, make alternate sources of protein, whether it's fungal protein or mycoprotein or bug protein or plant-based, the ultra-processed Beyond Meat kind of crap, or even the cellular agriculture that's going on there, all of that is not in an effort to save the planet, make you healthier. It is purely motivated by greed and the thought that they can, tap into that $1.5 trillion, global meat economy. And if they can take away 20% of that, even some of the big meat companies, Cargill, Tyson, JBS, are investing in these alternative proteins, not because they believe in it, it's because they see the potential for profit. So it's purely driven by profit, just like most things. I mean, you just always ask, like, follow the money. Who's it's not you. I mean, it's slowly going to degrade the overall quality of our nutrition. I mean, it's already so bad. It's just like, well, we can just kind of continue eating people eating these processed food. I mean, there was a recent study that showed out that the more plant-based you are, the more likely you are to consume ultra-processed foods. I mean, and this is not good for your health, but it's also very lucrative from a financial standpoint, because this is where the profit, it's a lot easier to make money on ultra-processed foods than it is on, things like beef, because beef is, labor intensive. It is inventory intensive. It takes up some room, but the trade-off for that is you get this tremendous amount of nutrition that really, I mean, if you look back into the history of humanity, we've always, if you want to go back into sort of the religious text, meat was always prized. I mean, it's always been part of that. It's been since day one. People have known that. I mean, if you go back to the origination of the stock market, the Chicago stock yards, this was what was considered a store of wealth initially. Is how many cattle do you have? This means you're a rich person. And I think it still means it today. We've kind of displaced that with some of the other stuff. But I mean, if you can't even feed yourself correctly, you're not wealthy. I don't care. I don't care if you're Bill Gates. I mean, you look at the guy walking around. I mean, if I was, 100 gazillionaire with all the money in the world, I sure as hell wouldn't be walking around with, looking like I'm pregnant. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. So these people, their priorities are messed up. I mean, they're at core greedy, and some people would even say perhaps even evil. And it is to the detriment of you and I and everybody we love that they do this. And so we have to, as a collective, group of people. I mean, again, it's the many versus a few. The few are very powerful, very influential, very well resourced. But when millions and millions of people stand up, we can get things done. And we're seeing that, in places like, you probably saw recently in the Netherlands, where, they kicked out that clown, whatever his name, Root, whatever his, whatever, he's his the World Economic Forum, appointee basically. And they said, hey, enough's enough. We're not going to deal with this. And there's a lot of issues driving that. But I mean, one of them was the attempt to shut down the food supply, put these farmers out of business. Now, right. I think, and, we saw the outrage, worldwide outrage with that. But I mean, it's interesting that in the United States, we have lost 1970 or so. We had about 1.3 million individual ranches, ranchers, mom and dad ranches, 50 head of cattle. We're down to about 700,000 now. So we've lost in the last 50 years, 600,000 ranches have gone under, and many of them have been bought up by corporations or turned into a parking lot for a commercial business zone, thing like that. So we have to watch that, because we are in danger of this. And I think this is one of our greatest resources in the United States. We're a resource-rich country, but our ability to produce food, and we've been feeding the world or much of the world for a long time, but that is under threat, and they want to feed us, I mean, just absolute garbage. Food is software. They can patent it, turn it into intellectual property, make enormous profits off of that, all on the back. Anybody who's paying attention, people are getting rich off of your suffering and misery and your illness and disease. And this feeds into this in a bigger way.
We had a reunion on my wife's side of the family this past weekend, and her grandmother, later this month, she'll be 101. And she lives on her own, drives herself. She has a massive garden. She's just crushing life. She's sarcastic. She's funny. She's almost irritatingly high-level energy, and knows what's going on. She's a blast to be around. And I look at that. We talk with her. She laughs about trends that have come of like, butter's bad for you, go to margarine, and don't do this. I mean, she's like outlived all these things that have come along. Don't eat the yolk, only eat egg whites. Don't eat the egg whites, only eat the yolk. Like, she's seen all these things come and gone, and she just kind of eats what she grows, and stays busy, stays active. There's a picture of her, 101 years old, and just crushing life. And, you know, you got to kind of look at some of these people like a Dr. Linus Pauling, who was talking about maybe 10,000 milligrams of vitamin C are good for you. And they threatened to take away his medical license. And, you know, but he outlived all of his critics. You know, even like a Jack LaLanne, you know, and to me, just some of these people that like produced great fruit in their own bodies, their own life. It's in such stark contrast to these, what I consider like radical measures that they're trying to push. When you're talking about eliminating a food group with a major question mark without a lot of science, and how do we do? Again, I'm just a layman. I'm just a guy here in Missouri trying to make sense of this, but I can't remember the last time I remember somebody from India dominating at the Olympics.
No, it's interesting. India they are now the most populous country in the world. They surpassed China, I think, even this year at 1.4 billion. They are number, I think, 57 in Olympic gold medals. I mean, you think about it, you know, China's number 6.
And look at Jamaica or, you know, some of these places, you know?
Well, yeah, and they have you know, China and India have they've had similar GDPs for a long period of time. I mean, their level of poverty was pretty similar for most. China's starting to ramp up a little more, but I mean, it is clearly, you know, something that has to do with nutrition. I mean, when you do not get high quality, bioavailable protein and fat with the appropriate nutrients, you suffer, and we see it. I mean, India is a perfect example of a country that has tremendous malnutrition, stunting, and you know, it's not all down to poverty. Most people say, well, they're poor. There are other poorer nations that don't eat in their way, that have much lower rates of these issues. So, yeah, it's a real problem.
Man, not a lot of famous power lifters coming from India. World's strongest man competition. You know, like my wife could probably, you know, compete. You know, there when you look at these things, but nutrition does matter. So let's talk about a little bit. Then, if we're going to a world that's trying to eliminate meat completely, it means you're kind of trying to eliminate Dr. Shawn Baker a little bit directly, because if I cut you open, you just look like a ribeye, man. You're just like, you know, full of steak. That's what you eat. Talk about carnivore diet. You got carnivore.diet as a website. People can also go to revero.com, REVERO.com, which is going to be geared a little more towards like the medical side and actually advice and consulting and coaching and some of those kind of things. But talk about the idea. You wrote this book, The Carnivore Diet. We've followed it, you know, several times now since we first heard of you. And actually, we did this before we met. You've done it since. It's the best I've ever felt in my life. I actually functioned a little better than my wife did. She needed to tweak it a little bit less red and a little more chicken and some of that kind of stuff. And she felt a little better. But we did lab work, blood work, all kind of stuff. We worked the Functional Medical Institute. Our medical doctor, Dr. Mark Sherwood, I don't know his exact age. He's a little older than probably you or I, and he is a six pack. The guy's just built like a brick house. He can still blow up a water bottle with his mouth, and he's a medical doctor. So he's a beast. They did our blood work, and like, you guys look amazing, and I felt good. No aches, inflammation, swelling. Like, I felt so good. The only thing, I had a little high portions to start with. We had to kind of cut that back a little bit, but it was a great process. That's maybe anecdotal evidence. What have you seen in this eating process yourself personally, and then consulting with, you know, and advising, you know, through media and otherwise thousands of people over the years?
Yeah, well, I mean, my personal story is not that exciting. I mean, I you know, became a better athlete. I had to make the penny run away. You know, I was strong. I was probably put some metabolic disease in. It's great. I'm more to my fact. Gosh, now even tens of thousands. There's probably arguably hundreds of thousands of people that have now tried this, and a huge number of them, a high percentage of them, see dramatic changes. I mean, they anywhere from losing 250 pounds to putting autoimmune diseases or severe mental health issues completely into remission, getting off all medications, getting their lives back, quite honestly. I mean, these people, we got some pretty sick people out there that, I mean, they have a pretty miserable existence. I mean, they feel awful all the time. They have no energy. They barely get out of bed some days. And to see those people going from that to, you know, active, engaged, productive, happy people, is so incredibly rewarding. And so, in the 7 years that I've been doing this, and and advocating for this, I've seen some tremendous shifts in more acceptance towards this. Now, I don't, again, I wrote the book called The Carnivore Diet, and it doesn't mean humans are strict carnivores, and we've always been that. It's a dietary protocol that is used to fix things. I mean, we have such a broken food system, it's not really broken people. This is just a very effective way at fixing that. Some people like to do it for I've been doing it for 7 years. I feel great. That's the best I feel. Like you said, I felt great on it. That's what I like. I like feeling good. So I have been, like I said, advocating for this for quite some time. We've got several studies in the literature. We have more on the way to get more science behind this, because people say, well, it's just anecdotes and so on and so forth. But we now have, I mean, if you just go to Carnivore Diet, there's nearly 1,000 testimonials on there. That's a lot of testimonials. I mean, you could put any other person, they don't have 1,000 testimonials. I mean, I've got interviews with 1,000 people that I've talked to and spent 30, 45 minutes, an hour with them discussing their transformations with objective lab results, imaging studies in many cases. So clearly something's happening here. Our company Revero, we recognize that the healthcare system is broken. It is, in my view, it is irretrievably broken. It is married to the pharmaceutical. It dominates the whole trajectory of what you go. When you go to the doctor, odds are you're getting suggested a medication, put on a medication, and that's for the rest of your life in many cases. And I believe, and many others like me believe, that most of these diseases have a cause that we can fix, and we can turn back and actually, quote unquote, cure disease, which I think most of medicine has given up on that. They don't talk about curing disease. They talk about treating disease, treating symptoms with ever more and more expensive medications, typically, with limited efficacy. The efficacy's, it's like, whenever you see a product on the shelf, they got the new and improved, right? And it's like 2% better than the last one. Well, it's kind of like you just continually suck people along with this new and improved thing when you never really address the problem. We should not have, I think most of us should not be living in states of disease. If you look at the average 65-year-old in the United States, they're on something like 4 or 5 medications on average. That's, to my view, completely insane that we should not be on, really, almost with rare exception, any medicine, particularly long term, outside of a few like type 1 diabetics perhaps. But anyway, that is our goal. We will be seeing patients in all 50 states very, very shortly. We raised a bunch of money last year, and we've been steadily working behind the scenes with software engineers and hiring physicians and developing treatment protocols and doing all this stuff to get ready to launch, so that we can start taking people that are sick and, maybe for the first time in their life, actually getting them healthy and getting them off medications, which is what we should be doing as a healthcare system, instead of just constantly, here's a new pill, here's a new drug, But anyway, it's a different way to think about things.
How much trash do you probably have in a given week? One thing, this is kind of a joke or a rhetorical question, but I noticed when we followed this protocol, the amount of garbage that we had in our trash can went down dramatically, because nothing was packaged, nothing was in a wrapper, nothing was in it. We were pretty much eating just real food, and in fairly small quantities. I kind of did a little bit of intermittent fasting with it, not even intentional. I just felt better. And I was so satiated. I felt good all the time. I didn't have a spike in energy and a drop and a sleepy afternoon or any of this stuff. Energy was sustained. But there was actual less trash in the trash can.
Yeah. I mean, this is something when we talk about sustainability, and energy and all the things we're talking about. And, I think, yes, we want a less polluted planet. That makes sense. But, we want less trash. I probably use, if I was just thinking about myself, how much trash I create in a week, with what I eat and stuff like that, probably about one tall kitchen trash can a week. That's what I would produce. Now I remember we had some, one of my relatives they're vegetarian, and they came over to visit with us, and our trash production went up like quadruple. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe how much trash we're producing. And you think about it, when we talk about here's another thing most people don't think. People are talking about greenhouse gases and all that stuff, and whether you believe that is, driving any kind of climate thing is that's debatable for sure. But we do know that, for instance, the healthcare sector produces 10% of the greenhouse gases in the United States. and cows produce about 2%. So every time you go to the doctor and you get pills and you do like when I was operating on people, when I do a surgery, like I replace somebody's knee, literally 8 to 10 giant 55-gallon containers of trash would be created for just one surgery, right? And if you can avoid those surgeries, which I think you can through diet and lifestyle, how much are you saving just on that alone? And not to mention all the plastic that's used, all the plastic parts and all the fossil fuels and all the petroleum products that go into making that stuff.
Sure.
And so we're not calculating that as part of our calculus. It's very binary. Meat causes methane. Beef production makes methane release. Methane, theoretically drives up, temperatures, and therefore we need to cut out beef. It's a very reductionist way to look at things, and it's very short-sighted. And I totally disagree with that. By the way, I don't think meat is a problem. I don't think cow farts are boiling the oceans, like my friend Safety Amos likes to say. I think it's complete garbage, complete nonsense. Whatever you believe about climate change, it's not cows. I guarantee that. I mean, we've had cows and ruminant animals grazing this planet for literally since the dawn of time. And, at some points far, you can go back to the, mid 1800s when we had, 40, 50 million head of buffalo running around, not to mention all the deer and elk and everything else that was antelope that was running around. And those numbers are way down. Thanks to a lot of the buffalo slaughter that occurred in the late 1800s. And so we didn't have climate change then. And the other thing is, if somebody were to ask you, if cows are driving the climate warming, as we like to talk about, why do we have less cows now than we did in 1980? I mean, we have less cows now in the world than we had in 1980.
Wow.
In the United States, we had 130 head of cattle, 130 million head of cattle in 1977. Right now, we have like 90. So we've lost like almost 40% of our cattle. How is that how does that make sense? It doesn't. I mean, it's just in complete contradiction to what you're being told about this stuff. So, I mean, just pure math. I mean, they have to make up the math or something like that to justify it. So, crazy times.
You can see what's coming down the pike when they start getting celebrities involved. Robert Downey Jr. is on late night shows talking about bug-based proteins. You got who's Tom Cruise's ex-wife? Now she's got the country singer, Kidman, the Australian. She's on TV. So it's like, hey, we put a pretty lady on TV and she's eating bugs. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, that seems cool. If they get Taylor Swift to do it, it'd probably be like, oh, well, I'm going to be like her. They get people that have no idea of anything that's actually happening. And if they can get them to do it on a screen, then people want to do it at home. That's how lockdowns work. It's baffling. People can look out the window and skies are blue, but somebody on the TV says that the skies are green, and they're like, and then they look out the window again and they're like, I must be wrong. And they believe the person on the screen. That seems to me to be a tell of where they're going. Because when you got celebrities doing something that's very grotesque, very unnatural, something that's not a basis of their life or background, it seems to be that's the direction they're going. And that quote I had in the beginning of is there a group of unelected bureaucrats, elites that are involved in a global campaign to minimize meat consumption, convince people to not eat meat, and to eat bugs instead in order to save the world from climate change? The answer is absolutely, because they're beginning their marketing campaign and the PSYOP to program people into thinking, well, it can't be that weird. Nicole Kidman's doing it. Iron Man, I mean, he can fly. He's pretty cool. He's eating bugs. That's clearly where they're going. And then here's the argument. They'll say, well, if you're eating a lot of meat, you're going to have heart problems. You're going to have high cholesterol. You're going to not be well. What are the pushbacks that you get from that crowd to what you purport?
Well, I mean, certainly. I mean, we've red meat in particular has been demonized for a long time. If you look at the foundation of the American Dietetics Association, it was founded in 1917 by vegetarians. I mean, these are people that founded the very foundation of nutrition science in this country, and by extrapolation, most of the world has been vegetarian, and they occupy and have inhabited the highest echelons of nutrition forever. So there's always been this bias against meat. And so we've been told, when Eisenhower had his heart attacks in the 1950s, oh my God, it must have been the meat. Forget the fact that he's a 4-pack a day smoker. I mean, that was kind of overlooked at the time because we still thought smoking was good for us. And so what we continue, we're continually told that, there's this really weak science called epidemiology that shows associations between eating meat and various, outcomes, mortality, cardiovascular disease, so on and so forth. But then anytime you actually do real science, and that's not real science, that's just, observational data that's extremely weak. And most of the people, even the policymakers realize it. They say, well, we know it's weak science, but it's the best we have, so we got to go with that. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. Why would you make policy based on admittedly poor, science that can't tell you that answer? And so we're seeing that. And the reason is because it's financially lucrative for many people. And so what I see is, fortunately, there are some people out there that are pushing back, myself and many, many others like me, and we're just disproving it on a daily basis. I mean, I have people that are, constantly assessing themselves, cardiovascular imaging, and it keeps showing up, hey, you don't have heart disease. You don't have heart disease, over and over, despite the fact that you've been eating, 2 or 3 ribeye steaks a day for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years. Where's the heart disease? When's it going to show up? Well, you just got to wait. It's going to be there, probably by the time you're 90. Well, I'm like, okay, well, well, yeah, I'm going to die like everybody else, you mean? So it's really, it's really showing itself. I mean, and like I said, the good news is through what you're doing and other people on media pushing back hard enough on this, we are seeing numbers in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands, and eventually millions that are just saying no more. I don't believe this stuff anymore. And what they're finding out is that they are, not only are they not dying early, but they're getting as healthy as.
And I think a great pushback on that is social media. It's being out in the open about it. A lot of people, if you want to start playing smaller, just because that's people are being afraid of being called a name. Like, you want to disappear from society. You don't want to have an opinion because you're going to be called a racist or something. It's like, well, you'd better know for sure if you're a racist or not. If you are, then work on it. If you're not, then don't let it affect you. Don't let people's name call you one thing or another, whatever the name is. That seems to be the technique, though, when people's arguments fail. One thing I like on your social media, and people can find on your Instagram at Shawn Baker 1967, that we keep playing this clip of you eating this steak there, which I think is like the funniest thing in the whole world. I've never watched somebody eat before. You're the only person in the whole world I'd ever just sit and watch eat. It's because you do it while you're playing a video of some out of shape, squishy head talking about something dumb, and why you shouldn't be eating meat, and they're like in terrible health and they're living on like tomato paste or something, and you listen to their Instagram or their TikTok video while you're eating a steak, which I think just makes it exceptionally funny. You're nods along with it, you're enjoying your steak while they're selling their case. To me, I think that's kind of how you win a war of ridiculousness. Combating bad ideas is just showing the ridiculousness of it and just doing your thing. But you do it in such a clear, joyful, non-combative, yet still kind of giving the middle finger kind of way that I think is it's really unique.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying about, if people aren't sure, if you're an idiot, don't speak and make it obvious, because you get some people that get up there and they just say nonsense, and you're just like, I'll just let them speak, and they can. I mean, they're their own worst enemy, so to speak. Some of the advocates for plant-based diets are the biggest detractors, that turn people off this. And I think one thing the point you'd made and kind of alluded to is that not hiding. This isn't a fight you can just go. I see people say, I'm going to go out in the mountains and hunt. Well, that's only going to last so long. This isn't, I mean, if everybody started hunting for their meat, I mean, we'd run through the deer population in 6 months. I mean, they'd be gone, right? So we have to fight to keep, animal agriculture alive and support our ranchers. And it can't be, I'm just going to go hide and stick my head under the thing and, wait till my time passes and leave it to my kids. This is a fight we all need to be in today, now, all of us. And I think one thing you'd made, the point you'd made and kind of alluded to is that not hiding. This isn't a fight you can just go, And it's something that, I mean, you can't pass the buck down to your kids. I mean, it's just not fair to them. And if you do that, they're going to be even more overwhelmed. Enough people have enough sanity to hopefully prevail. Because the little kids, I mean, you see how what the kids are being taught in school today, and it is, and a lot of them are becoming brainwashed. And it's, when you look at the Generation Z, how many of them have all these crazy ideas that we all think are crazy. The numbers are quite high. You compare that to people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, it's much different. So we have to sort of, not only make the fight, but also teach our kids. Teach your kids, hey, look, this is, I mean, first of all, I mean, there's people out there saying that nutrition has no bearing on obesity. We got this Dr. Tamika Stanford out of Harvard University getting up there in 60 Minutes saying obesity is a genetic disease, and it doesn't matter what you eat, it doesn't matter how much you exercise, you're still going to be obese. So, wink, wink, nod, nod, take a drug. She's also sponsored by Novo Nordisk. So she's getting money from these drug manufacturers, and she's on our U.S. Dietary Guidelines Committee, by the way, telling us what we're supposed to eat. So it's so
in the media. I remember when
cool.
Adele, the singer, lost a bunch of weight, and she got beat up by social media. And part of it was she quit drinking alcohol. I think she got sober and started working out, and it kind of changed a lot of things. I think she's probably a lot happier, healthier person all the way around, but she got beat up for being thin. Like, you're selling out to the man, basically, or whatever. I don't know what all the pushbacks were, but it's like this reverse fat shaming. She was kind of accused of shaming people that were fat because she stopped being fat. And it's like this kind of weird mental judo that I don't know how they come up with it. But, instead of celebrating that, they celebrate the Lizzo and rappers that celebrate obesity, and they make that like it's a virtue or a character trait. Like what high character versus why not celebrate people that are leading by example and doing the right things and having a long, healthy life.
Yeah, it's very sad. I mean, I know you guys showed that clip of the Wally characters, and then these are actually people I'd seen. I was at the
Oh, you took that yourself?
Yeah, I took that myself. I was at the Seattle Museum of Flight, and there was a virtual reality little display, and I looked in there. There was these two morbidly obese people stuck in their VR glasses. Wow, that just looks exactly like the clip from Wall-E, and it's where we're going. I mean, we've got this, and we've got I just saw, like, it was MSNBC who just had a little article about how being in shape and being fit is now a right-wing conspiracy thing. It's like, that this is how you become right-wing, by becoming in shape, which is just, insane to me. Why are we politicizing being healthy? Why would you want why wouldn't you want your proponents to be healthy? Do you want them all? Maybe you just want them to be, these passive, like you said, weak-minded, weak-willed sheep people that they're just worried about, stuffing their face with their next, whatever cheeseburger or donut, and worried about how they're going to afford their pills. This is kind of what we're setting this up for this population. Whereas you don't need that. I mean, you can be someone independent. Why not be self sufficient, some level of independence, particularly around health. I mean, gosh, if you're dependent upon the healthcare system for your very existence, I mean, it's kind of like slavery. It really is. I mean, you're kind of like enslaved to this stuff, and you don't need to be.
100%. I think that's why, it shocked me when they first said that about, going to the gym, taking care of your body is this like right-wing thing. And I'm like, where did they come up with that? But I'm like, well, personal responsibility versus the government is going to fix something for me is kind of a right-wing ideology. Now it doesn't mean that every Republican out there is like fit, by any stretch of the imagination. But there is a predetermined premise of a platform of personal responsibility. Like if this is going to get fixed, I need to do it versus, going to the government, having the government be your God. When I'm deficient in something, the government is my source. Kind of a right-wing premise is that there is a God and he created us, and you wouldn't take an ocean water fish and have him swim in Coca-Cola, or anything else. Like, we're designed to function a certain way, and you kind of work with how we were created. If you don't think that we were created by something greater than yourself, you think that we're just, functioning, droids walking around that could be manipulated and owned and used for your own political gain, then I think being fit, going to the gym, not needing the establishment probably does seem like a right-wing extremist thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look to the government in general to manage your health, I tell people don't outsource your health to other people. You have the most skin in the game. You got to live in that body. But if you just go and look who's in the government and look at their health, they're not doing in very good shape. And it's like if you want to look like them and feel like them and be like them, then listen to what they're telling you. If you want to have something else, then you need to look elsewhere. And I think it's to me, the fact that we have these people that are clearly not able to even control their own health or at least have a clue what to do, making policy about the rest of the population, to me is again, it's just complete insanity.
Well, Dr. Baker, as we wrap up here, there's Maggie DeBlock. There you talk about it. And again, this is not about, beating up on somebody for an away problem or whatever health condition led to it. It's just, these are people that are making policy and telling you what you're doing is wrong, and they just have not earned that right. There's people I would go to for financial advice that I would not take one relationship tip from them at all. There's people that I would go to for a health and fitness tip, and I would not take one financial piece of advice from them at all. So it's like we all have to kind of take responsibility for where you're getting your advice. Dr. Baker, as we wrap up here, we're ending this. I want this to be a launching pad for people, not just to hear this episode, but to be able to follow you. I push the Instagram a lot because you really capture the narratives on a day in, day out basis, whether it's as funny as Zelensky meme or, whatever else. Shawn Baker, 1967, again, Flyover family. Follow him there because that's how you're going to kind of stay in the loop and kind of be reminded of some of these talking points. If nothing else, he's going to inspire you a little bit. He's going to make you think a little bit, and he'll probably make you laugh even a little bit more as you go, because he has kind of a quirky yet very effective sense of humor that kind of gets a point across in a cool way. Revero.com, REVERO.com. That'll be in the links below. Carnivore.diet will be in the links down below. People can be able to find your work on all 60 platforms, wherever you are. Like and share this episode. But I'm going to give you the floor here as we wrap up. There's a good chance as we move forward, this is only going to scale up one way or the other. What advice do you have to people to think strong and be strong and live strong?
Yeah, well, I think that, first of all, like I'd mentioned, you don't think about outsourcing your health and your health decisions to somebody else. A physician is your consultant. They're not your boss. You need to really strongly consider what the effects are on you if your quality of life is better. And I think people are often scared. I mean, use fear. Fear is a very effective tool. We've seen that, that cudgel being used over and over again to get populations to do what they want to do. But I mean, when people are telling you, hey, you shouldn't do this because you're going to have heart disease in 20 years or cancer, you're going to die early. The reality is no one really knows that. I mean, even all these longevity gurus will tell you this and that. I'm going to take this drug to make me live longer. None of them have produced results. I don't put any stock in that. What I tell people is if you're sick today, you need to get healthy tomorrow. And whatever it takes to get you healthy tomorrow is what you need to persist in as long as you stay healthy. And so instead of worrying about, your doctor say, oh, your cholesterol is going up a little bit, you're going to have heart disease. I mean, really look at where you are today versus yesterday and let that guide you, because I think, we as smart as we are, we've managed to mess a lot of things up, a lot of simple things, eating. I mean, there's no other animal on the planet that needs an app or a menu or any. I mean, it doesn't need to be that complicated, and so keep it simple in a lot of cases. It's if you spend 3 or 4 hours a day focusing on your nutrition, you're overthinking it for sure. I mean, it should be just like every other creature on this planet. It should be very straightforward. And I think the nice thing about a carnivore diet, it exactly is that. It's just, hey, I'm hungry. I'll eat a big old hunk of meat and I'm good. And it really works a lot better than you think. And be open-minded about it. I would encourage you to check out some of the testimonies at carnivore.diet. Just, whether you care or not, maybe you have someone in your family that is suffering and it might benefit from them, because you would be surprised. And, what's the worst that can happen? You eat a bunch of steaks for a couple months. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But, the downside, you ate a bunch of great tasting steaks and you'd be very surprised at some of the things that often cure clear up with this.
Man, yeah, especially arthritis, inflammation, swelling, these kind of things that cause a lot of pain is helpful for a lot of people. Thank you for being brave. Thank you for being a bright light. You are just a rare dude. Truly, we've done 1,700 conversations since we started this podcast, and you stand alone in a category by yourself as just unique, brave, smart, and just freakishly, ridiculously consistent. You don't change a whole lot day in, day out. You just stay the course, and it kind of shows you had a predetermined moral compass before this all began, and you're not looking to your left and your right for approval. And I think if nothing else, that's what people can take away from following you. Again, I want to drive into traffic to that Shawn Baker at Shawn Baker 1967 on Instagram. It would be worth having Instagram just to follow you there because it's so good, and I appreciate your voice. Thanks for taking your time to stop by and kind of break up this conspiracy theory for us today. Thank you for joining us again on another conspiracy conversation. I'm learning a lot. I hope you are, and I hope you're enjoying this journey as well. Another part of us being in this together, again, can't look to someone else to come along and save us. We got to take ownership of this information, ownership of our own outcomes, ownership of your children's education, ownership of your own faith, ownership of your own health for sure, and definitely ownership of your finances. That's where we really grabbed a hold of the reins because we had a relationship with Dr. Kirk Elliott going back over 25 years, actually before he had his first PhD. Now he has 2. We've known him for a long time and trust him completely, but he's helped us walk through this process of converting fake money that's depreciating on a daily basis and just transitioning it, bada boom, into something that's real and holds up and stands the test of time. There's never been a fiat currency throughout all of human history that has lasted. They all change and go under because government's corrupt. They print more of it. We've almost doubled our money supply in the last few years. That's why it takes more money to do the same thing that it did even a couple of years ago. So the way to battle that is tangible metals, gold and silver. The benefit is silver is pretty affordable. You can get 1 ounce of silver for now still around $25. And that is quickly changing as the entire world is moving away from the petrodollar, U.S. currency being the standard. They're moving towards CBDCs and gold-backed currencies for their own nations. You see it happening every day. It's one of these things. What do I do next? We use this relationship with Dr. Kirk Elliott. Go to his link. Go ahead and follow it. Flyovergold.com gets you into his world where there's PDFs or some videos that you can watch. There's a ton of information, but ultimately submit your information, set up a time, have a consultation where they just find out what are your goals. Do you have an IRA that you're wanting to move from fake money to real money, or do you have some savings? Do you have a lump of cash, something that you want to do, but getting your money out of a fake currency into something that's real? We do this every single month as a family. Most people that I know and personally work with are doing the exact same thing, little by little, the best that they can, moving things from a fake currency to something real. Because there's a storm going on around you doesn't mean that you have to go down with the ship, okay? You can survive this and come out better. These nations are moving to gold-backed currency. You can move towards gold-backed currency, and as those things go up because of the demand, you're in a good position. But you don't know what's good or what's not good until you actually take the call, take ownership of this area of your life. Go to flyovergold.com, find out this information, set up a consultation. You'll be glad you did. These are some people that you can really trust, and they'll take this concern away from you, and you can exhale. You guys, we'll see you again next time for another conspiracy conversation each and every Saturday. We're having a blast doing these. I hope you're having a blast on the journey with us. We'll see you again next Saturday.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Flyover Conservatives podcast with David and Stacy Whited. Please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and leave us a comment below. Lastly, if you enjoyed today's podcast, share with those who came to mind. Be blessed and make it a great day.